response then after the pause. So the emotional pictures themselves were selected from this International Affective Picture series of standard emotional stimuli. We chose those that had what we termed biologically prepared content. That is, for the negative images, things that we could assume to assume their negative value over the course of evolution, rather than being something that was likely only recently acquiring that negative association. So rather than guns pointing at somebody as fearful stimuli, animals bearing teeth, etc., we selected neutral, unpleasant, pleasant, and then some catch items, masked masks, matched them on valence and arousal norms, and then the stimulus types and masks for each type matched for luminance, so we didn't have any simple perceptual differences between them. This is an example of some of the pleasant images, some of them soft erotica, others nice relationships being pictured. This is actually from my laboratory. This was a gathering of the graduate students. And here are some of the unpleasant ones: teeth-barred dog, disgusting cockroaches, etc. So what did we find? Well, for their self-reported experience on this emotional mannequin, the meditators and non-meditating controls similar profiles of emotional experience. So the images that are selected normatively to be positive elicit greater positivity in their mannequin self-report. The negative ones, greater negativity of experience. And then this inverted, or this U-shape rather, characterizing arousal, with the neutral stimuli being experienced as less arousing than either the pleasant or the unpleasant images. So no differences between the meditators and controls there, demonstrating that at least experientially meditators don't become emotional eunuchs. They also showed similar patterns of physiologic response. So we recorded skin conductance, shown here, typically correlated with arousal level, and also corrugator and zygomatic facial EMG, corrugator kind of brow furrowing frown muscle, zygomatic muscle, a kind of smile area, and the expected pattern of responses. Greater skin conductance response to the pleasant and the unpleasant than to the neutral stimuli. No significant difference between the meditators and the controls. And again, a similar pattern of the corrugator activation to the unpleasant slides and the zygomatic activation to the pleasant slides. No difference between the groups. The story for the mass stimuli, however, was somewhat different, and in the interest of time, to allow me to summarize these rather than going through all of the graphs, I'll just do that verbally. So meditators rated the masked unpleasant pictures as less unpleasant than did the controls. So less aversive experience. Now remember, this is a kind of curious task for people because they don't think they've seen anything. So they're having to simply attend to their emotional experience and give some report on the mannequin. And for the meditators only, those who reported higher emotional clarity on a self-report measure, I'll show you in just a moment, showed lower skin conductance response and self-reported experienced arousal in both the masked and the non-masked picture conditions. So some correlation between this experience, this self-reported clarity, which correlated significantly with number of years of meditation practice, and these arousal measures. Meditators reporting higher emotional clarity also showed greater zygomatic EMG, the smile muscle, if you will, area in the masked condition. So I'm going to summarize that in just a moment. So let me go on first to expand that to some more recent data collection in which we now are looking not only at the long-term meditators, but at shorter-term meditators as well, those who have between 4 to 7 years of experience versus the long-term meditators in this group, 12 to 29 years of experience. 12 to 29 years of experience. In this group, 12 to 29 years of experience. They're well matched in age, including to the non-meditator control group, in their years of education. Type of practice, we recruited people from both Zen and local mindfulness practice tradition. We didn't see any differences between those traditions of practice, which end up being very, very similar in the kind of meditation training that they do. But keep in mind, they're very small samples, and I don't think I'd rely on the lack of difference to say anything in particular. We administered a fairly large number of self-report scales that included such things as the Trait Meta-Mood Index, the Toronto Alexithymia scale, an emotional creativity measure, all of which had been used by Goleman and Clore in a large study of several undergraduates, a fairly large sample of undergraduates, in which they then factor analyzed the responses and found two reliable factors, one of which they labeled as attention to emotion, extent to which people are monitoring their emotions, valuing them, and maximizing emotional experience. And then another one they labeled as emotional clarity, ability to identify, distinguish, describe emotions. This self-report, we use the factor scores to come up with separate attention and clarity measures. Long-term meditators were significantly greater than controls for clarity, with short-term meditators not differing from the controls on that dimension, and years of meditation practice positively correlating again with clarity. For the attention dimension, no significant group differences. You can't see the standard error bars here, but here's the one for the short-term meditators. Here it is for the long-term meditators, so considerable overlap. And the only thing it correlated with was age.
Oh, the long-term meditators, is that the 10,000 hours again?
Yes. Yeah, well, no, I'm sorry. These were individuals who were 12 to 29 years of experience. Okay, so we weren't doing it by an estimated number of hours on the cushion in the way that the Wisconsin lab tends to do. In our experience, we just don't think that's as reliable a measure. Years is grosser, but at least people have a better idea of how many years they've been practicing. Now, the relationship between attention and clarity was interesting. For the controls, shown in the blue line here, it's positive about 0.50, a significant relationship. For the short-term meditators, it was startlingly large, correlation of 0.99. For the long-term meditators, it was negative and unreliable, that's shown in red. So something very different in relationship between these two dimensions for the short and the long-term meditative groups. What about reports having to do with regulatory ability or indices of emotional well-being? Compared to controls, the long-term meditators tended to report being better able to repair their moods. That's from the Trait Meta-Mood Repair subscale. And also to report less public self-consciousness in regard to emotion. Long and short-term meditators also less depressed than controls, but I would caution here that that did not correlate with number of years of practice, and so not clear